I'm a little late on this word, but God told me I could write it down and remember it today. And He's like, you forgot something. Me? Yeah. So last night I kept hearing the phrase, a can of worms. Like your enemies don't even know that a can of worms has been opened. Like it's been opened. But you know, a can of worms to others is not what a can of worms is to me. When I was a little girl, I remember we had what we called the tube. Well, the tube was just this big metal tube that was beside my Uncle James's house, and it was in front of my grandfather's lake. And we'd all go down and fish, and my uncle was a professional fisherman, and he fished often on things like ESPN, and he was a really good fisherman. And he'd always ask me, like, why do you just want to fish with worms? I just did. First of all, the hooks were a lot of hooks and his shiny ones, but he never really second guessed. He just was like, okay. And I would take my cousins down with me, and they would always help me, and they would lift that big tube I couldn't lift, and they would pull out all these worms that I didn't even have to touch. They would bait my hook, and I never had to touch the slimy worm. That's how God's going to be in this season of wrath that your enemies have racked up so heavy for theirself. What's a can of worms to them is a tube of worms to you, and you're just going to get to keep fishing, keep going about your business. You're never going to have to touch the worm. God's going to do that for you. God's already handled that thing that you're thinking about. Whatever's on your mind right now, if somebody pops in your mind right now, if you feel up to it, send it over to them, because that thing is already handled. You're not the worm handler. You're just a fisherman after all. Keep fishing, keep living for the Lord, and keep doing the right thing. Do the next right thing every single time. You'll never be involved in the can of worms. You might watch it unfold, and you might watch them come out from under the tube, but you'll never have to touch them, and the can will never be yours. And that's quite promising. God protects His children. Never forget that. That is so biblical from front to back, from cover to cover. God's got you covered. You don't got to worry about the can of worms. But they do.